Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Welcome back to the Land to Lots podcast. My name is Carter Froelich, and today we're going to be discussing part 2 of our launch sequence. And in particular, we are speaking about the planning process. During our last episode, which if you did not get a chance to listen to it, I encourage you to go back and listen to the episode number 1, where we discussed, number 1, what is the launch sequence and why is it important? And then the project vision question, the return target, the project DOS conversations, which are all of the information that we need to gather from our clients and to help us move forward with the financing of their development. And we really look at this as kind of dumping all of the puzzle pieces on the table and flipping those puzzle pieces over, understanding our clients' goals, their dangers, opportunities, and strengths that need to be overcome, that need to be capitalized on and strengthened as we move forward on this trip, taking them from where they're at to where they want to go. So where I'd like to begin today is once we start to receive information from our clients, one of the most important things that we're looking at is their eligible costs and fees. So we'll go in and have our clients give us their opinion of probable costs from the engineers. We also want to understand their phasing schedule, meaning what is their conditions of approval with the jurisdiction, what are their off-site commitments, their on-site commitments, what is the scheduling for the timing of that construction, when do they have to have things completed to be able to get their certificates of occupancy. It is just a myriad of different moving pieces as it relates to the construction of this of their infrastructure. We also go through the listing of infrastructure, and our goal is to find the largest possible shopping basket for financing so that we can pick and choose what facilities we want to finance with what type of reimbursement source over time to allow us to be able to accelerate reimbursements into our pro forma sooner rather than later, and the ability to generate the largest nominal dollar reimbursement amount. As you heard me say, in the first episode, we ask the return target question of our clients, meaning, are you IRR driven or are you nominal dollar driven? By the way, you can only pick one. And even though, this will vary, meaning builders are typically more IRR driven. Some of the investors are IRR driven. You have some families that are legacy developers, and they're more concerned necessarily with they're more concerned about nominal dollars. And so here this can vary, but we do say you only can pick one so that we have a target that we can begin to aim for. But we're always looking at the end of the day, how can we possibly increase that nominal dollar as well? And we do that by making sure that we have listed every possible soft cost, hard cost, fee, real property interest as being eligible for reimbursement, so long as that is allowed by statute. And the other thing that we do is, once we have this listing of costs, is we prepare what we call a cost segregation analysis, where we start lumping these facilities into baskets, where we say, okay, we're going to finance this with development impact fees, we're going to finance that with line extension agreements, we're going to get the city to pay for this. We've got some other developers in the area. We're going to do a cost sharing agreement with them, and we're going to use these facilities for special districts. So it's really, really important that we start to kind of understand what we have to finance and what some of the other vehicles are available for us to begin to put those into baskets and to start documenting the things that we are going to have to ask the jurisdiction to allow us to do as it relates to either the formation of the special district or some of these other financing mechanisms. In a real life example, for instance, we had a number of developers that had to build a huge sewer interceptor line that ran from the northern part of this jurisdiction to the southern part where where the wastewater treatment plant was. So what we had done in this engagement is that we came together working with one landowner to start with and brought in 12 others that were going to be benefiting from this sewer interceptor line. What we had done is we had come up with a mechanism on how we were going to allocate the costs of this sewer interceptor line between all of the landowners that were moving forward with their projects, and how these costs were going to be allocated to the benefiting lands. And the thing that was funny is, in a learning experience, and I'll just throw this out, initially we said this is going to be based on your planned EDUs. And what we found is when we were talking about planned EDUs is that all the developers' planned EDUs went from, a number X to a number Y, and Y was a lot less than what X was. And so everybody was kind of moving their units around so they didn't have to pay as much of the cost of this wastewater treatment line. And so what we ended up doing is saying, okay, we're done with that method. Everybody is going to pay, assuming 3.5 EDUs per acre, per gross acre, and we're going to go from that. And that's what we ended up doing and how we were allocating the cost, because the gross acreages couldn't change. So once we had the methodology laid out, we worked with the attorneys to prepare a cost-sharing agreement. We created budgets so that everybody knew what they would have to pay, when they would have to pay it. We monitored these budgets. We helped make sure that the draws were allocated a portion. We had to make sure that the draws were allocated pursuant to everybody's cost-sharing methodology, and they to also then make sure that the money came in and the contractors were paid. So literally, we really were kind of the coordinators, if you will, of this cost-sharing agreement, and making sure that everybody got paid and everybody paid as they were required to pursuant to the cost-sharing agreement. The other thing we did is made sure that we could preserve the capacity in the line such that we weren't building this for the benefit of others. And if anybody else was going to tap into this line, we made sure that because they didn't join initially, that there was a hefty financial penalty for them to tie into the line and not pay for it as part of the cost-sharing agreement. So that is just kind of one of the things that we look at doing. Other ways that we can finance infrastructure that we look at segregating and creating more revenue streams are construction and transaction privilege taxes, property tax increment, and then also jurisdictional contributions for oversizing. If we can, typically what we want to do is say, hey, listen, we needed a 12-inch line. We'll be happy to pay for the 12-inch line, but you want a 24-inch line. Therefore, you, jurisdiction, pay the incremental cost from oversizing from a 12-inch to a 24-inch. And that way we're able to reduce our costs. We're going to be in the ground anyway, so we've got those trenching costs. But this way we can get the jurisdiction to pay for that upsize, and we're not having to pay for it and wait to get reimbursed over time. So these are just a lot of the different things that we look at. Once we've come up with all these different mechanisms and we have all of our costs, as I mentioned before, then we go and start to allocate those into what we call a cost segregation analysis. and making sure that we have all of these costs put in one of the buckets that we believe that we're going to be able to achieve and secure and to be able to enact as part of our financing strategy that we're going to go and talk to the city or to the jurisdiction or the county with. One thing that we have found is that oftentimes our clients overlook a lot of eligible infrastructure. And what we are always trying to do is to make our shopping basket as large as possible. So, for instance, in some states, California being one, we can finance school fees and we can finance jurisdictional impact fees. I think that we could, because the jurisdictional impact fees there is a nexus study done, and because that infrastructure is all public, I am personally of the belief that we can finance these types of facilities in a lot of different states. We're having those conversations right now with other states as we try to move the concept in California to other places. We can also purchase rights of way, so we want to make sure that that's eligible. We can purchase easements, either our own easements that we're granting to a district or a third-party easement. We like to add the ability to get paid financing costs. So to the extent that we're funding out of capital and waiting for the district to reimburse us, we want to make sure that we're getting paid for our capital costs related to that. So here again, we're taking a look at all of the different costs that are involved. We're putting them all together. We're making our shopping basket as large as possible. We're beginning to segregate those costs into various cost groupings so that we can have a better understanding of how we're going to finance the various facilities and how all of these financing mechanisms are going to come together to coalesce. The next item that is hugely important to us is looking at our project's competitive tax rate vis-a-vis the competition. Even though we've loaded up, we know what all of our costs are, we know what costs are potentially available for financing through the special district. Where we begin our special district financing is with the property taxes. So what is our current property tax rate? If we're in the county or in the ETJ and we're annexing into a jurisdiction, what will be the impact on our tax rate? It'll go from X to Y. And if we're going to be in the city, then we need to know what our tax rate will be in the city and how does that compare to our competition. And we can do the best financings possible, but if we're loading up our client's property tax rate in comparison to their competition, and we are dramatically higher than everybody else, if we're not building a hugely better mousetrap, people are going to vote with their dollars and they're going to go to other communities where the property taxes are lower. So we need to know what the competitive marketplace's tax rate is and so that when the home buyers are buying, they know that all things being equal, the property taxes in our clients' master plan community are comparable to or similar to the competition. If we're higher than, we need to be able to have some very specific, tangible, physical things that we can point to. Hey, we've got this better school. We've got a Crystal Lagoon. We've got this great location. We are closer to employment, transportation nodes. I mean, something that we can point to show why the home buying population should be willing to pay more to be in our project versus someone else's. The other thing that we want to be able to do is to also have an understanding of what are the impact fees that the competitive master plans are paying. If they're in different counties, different cities, they may have different impact fees that they have to pay. And also, what are their HOA requirements? Because all of this, number one, goes into either the cost of infrastructure and the cost that builders will have to recoup when they're pulling their permits, or it also goes into what are the costs of home ownership. All of this information can help inform us and lead us down one path or the other. The thing that I really want to make sure that everybody understands is that oftentimes our clients can become enamored by their projects, and rightfully so. I mean, some of these projects are just gorgeous, but I don't want people to become delusional in that their project is so much better than everybody else's. I mean, we are really looking clear-eyed at the numbers, and here again, we're going to give you our interpretation of what the numbers are saying and what those opportunities and or challenges will be if we're keeping our tax rates comparable to or in excess of our competition, because we really need to make sure that when we go to sell to the builders, when the builders go to sell to the homeowners, that the homeowners feel, the home builders feel that they're getting great value for their money. Number one, we've got a great location. We're in a great school district with great ratings and test scores. We have the best ingress and egress to the transportation corridors. Or, you know what, we've got the only topography and views in this area. Or this is the last developable parcel in the city. Or, we have great amenities, either natural or man-made, in our community that nobody else has. So we really, really, really need to be clear-eyed and honest with ourselves in these kind of discussions, because the thing that I do not want to do is to overburden a project with excessive special district taxes that will have to be borne by the homeowners that aren't comparable to or similar to other communities in the area. Now that we have an understanding of the tax rate that we can potentially increase our property taxes to, we use this information along with the response of our developers and the return factor question, meaning are you IRR driven? Are you nominal dollar driven? We have an understanding of what our eligible costs and our eligible fees are through the preparation of what we call the eligible cost and fee matrix. We've got our competitive tax rate analysis. Now we take all of this information and we drop it into our market-driven bond sizing. And depending upon what states we're in California, it's a special tax levy. In Arizona, we look at general obligation bonds. We look at special assessment bonds. In Nevada, it's a special assessment. In Idaho, it's both a combination of GO and assessments. In Texas, it's typically a PID, which is a special assessment, or it could be an MMD, which could be general obligation bonds and special assessments, or alternatively, it may be a MUD, which is general obligation bonds. We also have the ability in Texas to throw on tax increment reinvestment zone, which is tax increment. So every state is a little bit different. But here again, based upon what our clients told us they want to achieve, given the jurisdiction, the state we're in, if our clients are looking at increasing their IRR, and that's their most important aspect, if we have the ability to do special assessment bonds, then that's where we're going to look, because using special assessment bonds allows us to issue off of the fair market value of the land, assuming the infrastructure to be financed through the bonds and or any other infrastructure for which completion guarantees have been provided is in place as of the date of valuation. And then we're issuing off of either a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 value to lien ratio. and we're able to get that money and build out of bond proceeds, or we're able to get that money sooner in the process to reimburse us for the cost of that infrastructure that we just put in. So there's a lot of different things that we can do when we're looking at the special assessment bonds. And what we like to do is we can take learning experiences that we've done in other places, such as, for instance, Florida, where we do an A bond and a B bond, and where the A bond is the long-term bond that will be passed on to the homeowner. But because we have so much value in the land, we may do a secondary bond on top of the B bond, which is typically short-term, where may have a 5-year term, and we'll load up the property with the liens. And then once we have to build out of bond proceeds, and once we have a revenue event, we pay off the B bond and pass on the A bond. But here again, what did that do? That allowed us to not have so much money, meaning we have other people's money in the project. We're building out of bond proceeds, here again, using other people's money. And then once we have a revenue event, we're using that to pay down the B bond, and we're passing on the A bond. So here again, all of this begins to inform what we're trying to do. And you can't structure a financing just by running a bond sizing. You have to understand everything that's on the table and how the pieces come together. And that's what we at Launch do. We have done this thousands of times, and this is what we bring to the table. So that's kind of the special assessments. For instance, in order to max special assessments, if we have the ability, like we do in Texas, oftentimes we'll use a tax increment reinvestment zone subsidy to pay down our assessment, meaning we'll load it up, but then we'll use the property tax increment that can come in over time as the home gets on the tax rolls, and the city and the county give us portions of our property tax revenue to pay down the annual assessment to the homeowner. Therefore, the homeowner is paying a market-driven effective property tax rate, but some of that payment is coming from revenue that they are paying the city and the county, and the city and county are giving that back to us to pay down the tax rate to an acceptable level for the marketplace. So here again, lots of different tools that we can use. It just really depends on what jurisdiction we're in. Now, if our client is a more nominal dollar, okay, we're looking at general obligation bonds. Whereas special assessment bonds are one and done, meaning we're issuing a special assessment lien on a property and we're selling that property, and we don't have the ability to issue another assessment on that property. With the GO bonds, we have the ability to issue debt over and over and over again. And as we issue those general obligation bonds, typically the interest rate goes down and we're able to refinance, and or the home values go up and we're able to pull out more money out of the bond financing. So what exactly does that mean? So for instance, if let's just say we have a Texas MUD, and we are levying 90 cents for debt service. Let's just use that number. Once a house gets, the first bond issue we may do would be at a higher interest rate typically, because those bonds have not been rated. We're at the riskiest stage of the transaction, meaning that all of the repayment responsibility is with the master developer and maybe a handful of home builders. So that first bond may be a very small bond. I'm just making up the number, $500,000. It's secured by the 90-cent ad valorem tax rate. Our weighted average home price is $450,000 in this example. We issue debt for $500,000. Over time, as we have more home builders in our project building more homes, and we've diversified the repayment risk from one master developer and a couple of home builders to a master developer, multiple home builders, and hundreds of home buyers. The risk profile on that transaction has gone down, and our interest rate, which was initially at, let's just call it 5%, now has been brought down to 4%. Well, we have the ability to go back in, and not only do we have a higher assessed valuation from more homes being constructed, but over time, as homes are constructed, those home prices go up, and that impacts the assessed valuations of the existing homes. So they've gone from 450 to 475 to 500, all of which is creating more assessed value. The interest rates are going down so that we're able to refinance the old 5% debt to 4% debt, and we're able to pull out more and more money over time to reimburse us for eligible costs. So that's the beauty of the general obligation bonds. Unlike the special assessment bond, where we're one and done, with the general obligation bond, we can go back to the well over and over again, issue more and more debt, lower the interest rates, and use that to repay us over time. One of the pros of the GO bond is that we can issue multiple debt instruments as the assessed valuation increases, and as we diversify the risk, and we can lower and refinance the old outstanding bonds. The con of the GO bond is that we have to wait longer in the pro forma for us to be able to get that money. So if we're impacted by the time value of money, we're wanting to look at the special assessment bonds where we're able to get that money sooner rather than later. And that concludes this episode of the Land to Lots podcast. Stay tuned for our next podcast, where we continue our discussion of the launch sequence planning process. Thank you very much.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcasts to never miss a new episode.